This week on World Traveler Cooking, Shakshouka. Now this is a Middle Eastern and North African dish found everywhere: Lebanon, Israel, Egypt, North Africa, Tunisia, etc. It's basically a tomato stew with peppers, onions, eggs, various spices. Quite delicious, great breakfast. I'm making it for a few people today, so I'm making more than maybe you'd want to make. I do suggest making a fair bit. You can always cool off most of it and then reheat it just before you add the eggs. And 2 eggs per person is a fairly good way to go. So I'm going to use 8 eggs today. So this is about enough for 4 people. For the ingredients, we have an onion, I'll come to that in a moment, some bell peppers, 2 bell peppers I'm using, 2 cloves of garlic, maybe I might add 3. I'm probably going to use about 1/4 of this chili pepper just to give it a little bit of warmth. We're going to use some of this cumin, some salt and pepper, obviously canned tomatoes. A lot of people use whole tomatoes. The store I went to today didn't have any, so I got crushed tomatoes. I'm using Italian tomatoes for this, which might be a little overkill, but that's all I could get here in Indonesia. So, you don't have to use fancy, expensive Italian tomatoes for this, but I'm doing that here. We have olive oil, and then at the end we will top this with some chopped cilantro and parsley. If you really don't like cilantro, you can leave that off. So, I'm going to go ahead and get things prepped as we get started. I'm going to chop the onion, and I'm going to seed and chop the peppers and the garlic. So, I'll be back in a moment to get this started. So once our pan's a bit hot, we're going to add a couple of tablespoons of olive oil onto the pan. And then, pretty quickly, we're going to add our onions. Yeah, if a few peppers come in, that's fine. But I like to start my onions before I get all the peppers in, because I think that just leads to a better experience. So we're going to go ahead and stir these for a few minutes until they just start to become a bit translucent, and then we'll be back. So it's been maybe a minute or 2, and you can see that these are starting to become a bit more translucent. As I say, I just like to give the onions a bit of a head start. And I'm going to stir in the peppers, and I'm going to keep stirring these in until they're relatively well cooked. So this will probably be another 5 minutes or so, and then we'll be back. Now, it's worth noting I'm using a carbon steel pan for this. Now, in this case, you really want a pan which is very, very well seasoned. If you don't have a well-seasoned pan, then use an enameled pan, or even better yet, a stainless steel, or even a non-stick. But don't use a relatively unseasoned reactive pan like this, like a carbon steel or a cast iron pan. If these ones, they really need to be well seasoned. So in goes my garlic and my chili pepper. I'll stir this in a little bit, and then I'll add the dried spices. I do that in stages just to make sure I'm stirring enough. About a tablespoon or so of paprika. I'm going to pour this out onto my hand. That's not enough. There we go. That's probably always better to have too much paprika than not enough. And note, you could have used a little bit of dried chili instead of the fresh chili. Here it's just easier to get the fresh chili though, so that's why I use that. And now a bit of cumin. Add cumin last if you're adding it in phases, because cumin has a tendency of burning. So a bit of cumin, and then we're going to stir this together, and we're going to continue to cook this for another couple minutes. You'll note immediately that the oil gets absorbed by the paprika. And now I think we're ready to add our tomatoes. There's no finesse to adding the tomatoes, just open and pour. And then we want to make sure our heat's the way down. And we're going to stir this all together. Now we're going to let this sort of heat up until it's generally boiling. We'll correct with salt and pepper now. I'm just going to add some salt and pepper. I've cooked with these tomatoes before, so salt it relatively well. And add pepper as you like. And now just kind of gently stir until everything's kind of simmering. And you'll note that some of the flecks of onion are a little bit dark. That's okay. It'd probably be better to have kept the heat down just a little bit more, but I don't think this is going to be a problem here. It's worth noting again that the two issues with using a carbon steel pan like this are the paprika, which is going to absorb a lot of the oil, and the tomatoes, whose acidity can eat through the seasoning and actually into the pan itself. So if you're going to use a pan like this, make sure it's really well seasoned. This one should be plenty, but if you have like a stainless steel or an enamel pan, that would be better. I can't find my enamel pans at the moment. They're still in boxes. Otherwise, I would have used one of them. So, we'll be back in a few minutes when this is nice and hot and nicely stewed. You can, of course, let this stew for quite a while. And you can take out large parts of it at this point and basically save it to heat up with eggs later. Alright, so now that everything's nice and thick, of course if it's too watery you need to boil it until it's thicker, but it's nice and thick, it's simmering all the way through, we're going to go ahead and add the eggs. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make a little bit of a dimple in each time I add an egg. I'm just going to scoop a bit of this out, put it elsewhere, and then the egg will sit down there. So now we're just going to let this cook until the eggs are done, and then we'll be back. Now, I like my egg yolks just a little runny, so I'm gonna set it off here. You can let them cook longer if you like the eggs more solid. Now, if I'm going to serve it like this, I'd garnish like the whole pot. But if I'm going to go ahead and just serve individual portions, I can garnish those too. I'm going to go ahead and just garnish the whole pot so you can see it, and then I'll do the taste test. So, to garnish the pot, what I usually do is I take finely chopped greens, usually a mixture of parsley and cilantro, and I just kind of dust over the top here. People can put more on their individual portions, so you can serve that on the side. And then I'll just take the paprika and I'll just dust it over again with that. And here we have our shakshouka. Next up, taste test. And now for the taste test. First I'm just going to try the stew mixture. This is really nicely spiced. One slight problem just is that the cumin that I use seems to be mixed in with a bit of caraway. So a little bit of a caraway flavor, but that's not necessarily a problem. The overall flavor is really nice, really rich. Appropriate amounts of salt and pepper. The pieces of bell pepper are just nice. Now I'm going to try a bit of egg here with the runny egg yolk. That's just delightful. Now, if you find this content interesting, I hope I've earned a like and a subscription from you, and please check out my Patreon page if you'd like to support my work. There, without a subscription, you can get some idea of what my schedule is likely to be like and what other videos I've recorded. If you do subscribe, you can get early access to some of those videos. So, I certainly recommend you check that out. If you make this dish a bit differently than I do, I'd love to hear about it. Please let me know in the comments. And on top of that, I just want to say bon appetit and see you next week.